There you go, Aston. All right, so as we were saying, hello, 1, 2, 1, 2, can you hear me? Hello? Ah, perfect. Thank you very much. Our fireside chat then will be slightly reduced. I have a challenge for our very expert scientists on stage today, if they'll accept. We'll keep our answers short because ultimately we have less time than we'd hoped. But I wonder if we might start looking at the concept of social intelligence, because of course it's something that we're hearing a lot about. Asu, if I start with you, a question about social intelligence, which fundamentally entails understanding emotions, perceiving intentions, and interaction on a human level. What, if any, are the limits that you see currently today in artificial social intelligence?
Great. Topic very dear to my heart. I feel like, we're at an inflection point, indeed. Many panels actually emphasize that. And I think that's probably something I see a common theme across many of the talks. People all talk about, AI assistants, multiple agents. I think we're all predicting that they will be everywhere moving forward. I think the point I want to sort of emphasize is that very little questions or investigation is going into how these agents will be interacting with the humans. And even more broadly, how they're going to interact among each other. Mainly because this sort of, I emphasized this today in my talk as well, these AI agents, will be acting on behalf or giving recommendations to humans, and those humans are embedded in myriad, social, economic interactions. So they basically, directly or indirectly, will have to, face decisions that, will impact each other. And I think this is, I feel, very, despite all the excitement about AI and society, probably not very conceptualized even in terms of how we should be thinking about it.
Let's stay with that, Asyan. I'd like to bring Mike in there because this notion of the decisions that are made and how they're done. Mike, you've spoken in the past about the development of AI, the fact that it shouldn't focus purely on creating autonomous human-like entities. What do you make of the social framing and how ultimately it impacts how we think of intelligence?
Well, I think if you stand back 50,000 years from now, you ask what happened in this era, it wasn't that we were entertained, and it was really that we created culture, we created works of art, we created ways to communicate with each other, we created things that inspired us. That's what humans do. And to me, technology, if it doesn't attach to that, I'm just not so interested. I don't really want to wear a pair of glasses that reminds me I should have an appointment at 9 o'clock. I really want to have something that enriches the human experience, and it's not just my individual human experience. So for me, the world is full of not just stuff that I got to model in my head, it's full of people I interact with. And I don't know what they know, and they don't know what I know, and there's no way of capturing all that in a box. So I want to build economic systems. So I maybe just, in my career, I started with Dave Rumelhart, watched backpropagation, watched the error rate go down, 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 and I said, okay, brute force AI is definitely going to be a thing someday. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure the systems are reliable, trustworthy. Well, that's why I started becoming a statistician. I got enamored of statistics. And Yann probably, during his talk, noted that Mike said the word statistics too much in those days. Now, last 10 years, it's economics. I see economics everywhere. I see information asymmetries. I see people not understanding each other. I see need for, if you bring people together, things can happen that a single individual could never do. All that stuff. And what I'm missing in the dialogue, it's not just social intelligence, it's culture, it's interactions, it's allowing new things to do. Old technology like civil engineering created buildings and bridges so people could do new things.
So what I hear you saying, Mike, is that the things are missing. There are gaps ultimately that need to be addressed. Stéphane, if I bring you in here, because I think this notion of kind of augmenting social intelligence is key. What do you make of that? How do we improve, and I think that's what Mike was getting at, understanding of social sciences, and ultimately this idea of collectivity and not just being individual. How do we improve our collective response?
So social intelligence, it's a real question whether AI can improve it. Obviously, it does improve communication across cultures, but social understanding, I mean, we've rather seen a polarization happening, for example, on social networks. So I'm not so optimistic. And one reason is really trust, is these AI systems are owned by companies that have their own interests that may diverge with the interest of having social interactions, which are peaceful. The second point about AI having the ability of putting us all together in order to act towards common goals, there is a real issue here of interpretability of whatever diagnosis AI will give us. I mean, global warming is an obvious example where you have science which clearly is interpretable, give you clear elements, and still there is absolutely no consensus about what to do, and there again, I'm not so sure that AI can help. Now, the third point you've been raising, which is social science, here I think that there are very, very interesting possibilities, because social science, and I'm going to be caricatural here, but I've still very much remained over low-dimensional model, explanation based on few facts. And now we have experiments, we have data which offer the possibility of building much, much more complex models, including the models of network. But again, in social science, it's like in physics. You are not just interested in prediction, you are interested in understanding. And there again, that's going to be the issue of AI. We have prediction system, the understanding below is, we are quite far.
I mean, so much understanding that's needed, and it's certainly something that you brought up, Yann, earlier. I'm going to make an interesting shift here, because a lot of the questions that have been coming in from our audience today have been around sustainability with AI. So I'm shifting slightly, given the lack of time. Bernard, if I bring you in here, and I'm going to go straight to the point, what kind of headways or progress has been made when it comes to making energy-efficient algorithms that can ultimately help, you know, answer some of these global challenges which we're facing?
I mean, it's a big worry. First of all, of course, what's going on currently? If it were the case that all search queries were replaced by queries to a large language model of the GPT-4 type, then I mean, if you do a back of the envelope calculation, it might well amount to 10% or more of the overall energy consumption of the planet. And there's a lot of people, if I talk to young people, some of them say, I don't read a text anymore. If someone gives me a text, I first ask GPT-4 to summarize it. So we will find more and more users of these things. So first of all, it is a big issue. Of course, people are working on getting smaller models. Personally, I find this just as important as this massive scaling and trying to make everything better just by scaling. Maybe scientifically it's even more interesting to see how to get down to smaller models. But I think just as important is to think about the sustainability of our compute clusters, because currently everywhere in the world people are building compute clusters like crazy. And very often they don't take into account what kind of energy do you have in this place. And I think a great example how it should be done is the Finnish one, the Lumi cluster. They, I think, if I remember correctly, they found some kind of defunct, empty paper factory somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It was built next to hydropower, so the power was there. They just filled the building with compute. They didn't even have to do new concrete, which also produces a lot of CO2. And I think it's run 100% on sustainable energy. So the countries, I think they have to understand a cluster, and maybe, I think companies maybe already see it like this, but European countries, they sometimes consider a cluster a prestige project. It's something where you cut a ribbon and you get a picture taken that appears in the newspaper. And then they put it in places that are somewhere that don't really make sense in terms of sustainable energy. So I think the Finns did a good job. They put it in the middle of nowhere where nobody wants to go, but the energy is sustainable.
Okay, so some progress, but clearly a lot more to be done. Let's stay with the idea of sustainability, Yann, because you spoke about, systems being, not being quite where they should be, the fact that some systems have issues. What do you make of sustainable AI development goals? And is there enough collaboration around that in your view? Because we've heard a lot about collaboration today.
The answer is yes, and the reason is, okay, there's a number of things to say about this. So first of all, the totality of all data centers in the world, the power consumption is roughly about 3% of energy consumption, or electricity consumption actually, not all energy. So it's not that big, it's not negligible, but it's not that big. And the question is, if we end up using LLMs on a daily basis, as I was describing, and billions of people using this, is it going to, balloon to like some significant portion of energy consumption? And the answer is no, because it's limited by economics. I mean, are people ready to spend 2,000 euros a year to use an assistant, which is what it costs now if you want to use the top systems? Probably not that many people, right? I was talking to people in India who were thinking of installing data centers to serve AI assistant to the Indian population. The kind of budget that we're talking about is about 10 to 100 times smaller than what it currently costs. And so they say, if I want to serve 800 million people in India, the costs have to come down by something like 20 or 30. And so there's a huge incentive to do this. There's a huge incentive because that's the only way you make this economically feasible. You can recoup the cost of enormous investments in infrastructure. There's hundreds in each company, hundreds of engineers working on hardware, specialized chips to run inference faster. There's a number of startups also that do this. At the next level, people who work on low-level functions and compilers to make sure things are the most efficient possible. And then people who try to kind of distill big models into small ones, and then people who have a mixture of expert models so that you use simple models for simple questions and then more complex ones for more complex questions. Like, the incentive is there. Like, people are working on this already, and the economic incentive is really what drives everything. So it's not like people are neglecting the issue or not working on it. The other thing is that the hyperscalers, many of them have goals to be carbon neutral. Some of them already are. So Meta is actually carbon neutral in its operation, not in its supply chain, but its operation. And it does this by, buying renewable credits, basically, because you can't power a data center with solar power, right? Because at night you need to run it, right? But it's the biggest buyer of renewable energy in the US is Meta.
So you say the incentive is there ultimately, but it's about putting it into place. I'm going to make a link between sustainability and ethics, Asu, because it is something that needs to be done, something that needs to be put in place. How do we ensure that transparency and explainability remain at the forefront of discussions about AI? Because some of these ideas are so complex that the average person is not necessarily going to be able to relate.
It's a very good question. I think it's sort of a multi-pronged approach is needed here. We need to make sure that tomorrow's workers, researchers, students are all more cognizant of AI tools, what they're capable of, what their limitations are. On the other hand, I think I focus a lot on this human-AI interaction, how AI tools can help humans and human decision makers. And there, I think, a big focus on what I refer to as legible, understandable architectures are very important for these models to reach their potential. Without legibility, there's already some evidence that these tools are being introduced for radiologists, for doctors, and actually they're not really helping. They introduce new types of mistakes, even those that didn't exist pre-AI, because they don't really understand the recommendations that these systems are making. Sort of this communication. AI systems can be great, can give you all kinds of information, but if the communication between the human and AI is not properly thought of and designed, they may actually lead to different kinds of issues. In the case of radiologists, there are all these headlines around that, this is actually making it worse. Well, it's because they misinterpret the signals, the recommendations. They don't get the complete statistical information through those recommendations, and it basically says, okay, they don't know if they're telling them what they know, and they immediately succumb to things like confirmation bias. So I think it's very important for us to continue to focus on this sort of transparency, legibility, however you want to call it, that aspect of these models, and at the same time, make sure that people are well trained to be able to better work with these tools.
I mean, Nancy, you spoke about kind of misinterpreting things there and how, that could lead to issues. Mike, if I bring you back in here, if we look at a national or international level, what kind of role do governments, do companies, do we as individuals have when it comes to making sure that there's transparency that AC was just talking about?
You want me to talk about that? I mean, I think regulation should come well after you start to understand what the technology really can do. And I was talking about equilibria in my talks today. You're going to put a lot of things out there that'll interact with people in all kinds of ways, and people will create new things. There'll be new markets emerging, there'll be new kinds of cultures emerging. I want to see all that, I think, and it flourish. And a lot of that, once you understand what it can and can't do, you regulate to make sure that the whole system behaves in ways that, give high social welfare and don't have bad externalities and all that. Regulating too early will just stifle all of that. You won't understand what's happening. And, it's a really, really terrible idea.
Eric Xing was saying earlier that, it's about going full speed ahead in terms of AI to see where we are before. Similar to what you're saying, putting frameworks in place, because how do you know if you haven't done it yet? Is that a view that you'd share?
Yeah, no, what's going to be most fun about any technology is things you never anticipated. Like the 25-year-old who comes in and says, chemical engineering now exists, that you can make chlorine and make pools safe, and now I could do medicines, and now I could do this, and now I can do this. That's what I want to do. I want to see AI. I'm more interested in this complementarity notion, that it complements what humans do. It disappears somehow, and therefore our lives become more exciting, more interesting. I think a lot of us are the happiest when we're like creating something or whether they're interacting with somebody. And to the extent technology supports that, I'm all on board. To the extent technology gets in my face and tells me what to do, I'm not on board.
Stéphane, it'd be interesting to have your view on that. What do you think are the principal ethical considerations? Do we keep going full steam ahead, or do we kind of stop and flesh out the frameworks earlier, in your view, of course?
So you were speaking about regulation, I suppose. Here, clearly, there is a difference between an American and European approach to the problem. But if you think about the system that even you want to regulate, regulation is part of the experiment. If you only wait at the end to regulate, you will have no idea how to regulate. The regulation is things that has to be growing progressively as things are going in. Otherwise, the day you regulate, you are going to mess up completely, and it's going to be too brutal. So I have a tendency to believe that regulation is indeed part of the system. Anyway, companies are regulated. There are regulations all over. So the question is always a bit more, a bit less, and obviously this is a divide going across Atlantic here.
I mean, that dichotomy between, perhaps a US view or a European view, but it'll be interesting to get your insight there. Do we regulate first or later? I mean, at what stage do we regulate?
Well, I think it's, so if we look at how it was done in Europe, I think there were consultations, so they tried to get technical expertise. Maybe not everybody in the technical field thought they got sufficient technical expertise. And one thing that kind of surprised me was that many of the people that I talked to who were involved in the regulation, they were really proud that they were the first ones to regulate. And then I felt slightly uncomfortable. I thought, so Europe, we're really proud that we're the fastest to regulate. So maybe that's the one extreme. The other extreme, we would just experiment and break it. And probably both sides can learn something from each other. So regulating in a vacuum doesn't make any sense, because nobody can predict the developments.
Okay, all right. So find some common ground there. I hear you say. Sue,
Maybe just add as a person from US, maybe trying to. I think there's a lot of discussions around regulation. Europe is clearly way ahead in these discussions. But at the same time, if you think about human behavior, forget AI. We're clear on where that is regulated, right? So, in applications of healthcare, in applications of, you can't give medical advice. I can't, unless I'm properly certified. But these days, actually, that's one of the most appealing things of AI models. If you put your mom in front of it, that's the first thing they ask, what medicine should I use? Should I use this? Should I use that? So I think that is the way I'm thinking of around regulation. Start where human systems are regulated. There's a lot of work that went into it. So instead of trying to figure out what are the risky places where AI, trying to define risk through the AI system, really go through the humans and this human-AI complementarity, because these systems will be used by humans. So if you start by, where the use is already regulated, that would be an easy way to go. But beyond that, I agree with Mike. The other aspect of it is proper incentives and proper, maybe coming from the government, incentivizing socially beneficial directions, where this will, enable humans to flourish. Can we actually incentivize more research, more development in those directions? I think that's probably one of the most productive ways to go.
I have a very simple message about regulation. I think it's perfectly fine to regulate the deployment of AI systems. Certainly, if you have driving assistance system in your car, you want it to be tested by some government agency before it's put on the market. If it's used for medical diagnosis, analyzing X-rays or other medical images, you certainly want some sort of clinical trial, things like that. So nothing wrong with regulating applications. Where I think there was very contentious discussions in the past is that some people think AI is intrinsically dangerous, even if you don't deploy it, and made attempts to convince governments, people in governments, to regulate research and development. And I think that's extremely dangerous, extremely destructive. In fact, it's basically medieval obscurantism. Let's put it this way, okay? And it's very dangerous for the reason I explained earlier, which is that if you keep AI technology under lock and key, you're going to get regulatory capture by just a handful of companies, all in the US and in China. So we need open source models. If you have any kind of regulation that puts the responsibility of someone doing something bad with your open source model on the originator of the technology, you're not going to have open source.
I mean, you made an interesting point there. If we go above and beyond the kind of danger of, too much regulation, not enough, we've spoken today about dangers outside of that. People concerned that ultimately, algorithms are going to be biased, that they're not going to have, enough data protection. How do we remedy that? And how do we reassure people that, as you started out saying, AI is not something to be feared right from the outset?
There was a great talk by Emmanuel Candes today on bias. So you can take your black box, it'll always have bias, especially for things that are on the edge of knowledge that it doesn't have much information about. So that's why you got to be a statistician too. You got to say, look, I don't know enough to give you the answer here, or it's probably likely it needs to be corrected, or you should get a little bit of gold standard data to add to what the black box can tell you. It's a whole enterprise around these black boxes. These LLMs and all this, these don't solve the problem. They're a little tool that if you put a lot of other stuff around it, it helps, but they'll always be biased, and sometimes bias is good.
In what instance, Mike, is bias a good thing?
Oh, sometimes bias is good because you're biased to see a certain pattern that actually is going to occur. It's a bias. So it's not necessarily going to be true, but it is, being unbiased is kind of a meaningless concept, a useless concept. It's how to be biased.
Okay.
At the right time, in the right way. Be contextual. Be individual. Don't just do one rule for everybody, so it's unbiased on average across everybody. No, make it different for different people because it'll be better for people. Social welfare, that's again, it's economics. The concepts we need are ones that come about the aggregate, the collective. And there will always be bias, and that's desirable. I want price discrimination. I'm a little older. I want to be able to get a cheaper seat in the movie theater, right? What's wrong with that? it's good really for everybody.
Sure, sure, sure. So evoking kind of not the positivity of bias, but saying that it's actually not that bad and it can be beneficial at
Yeah,
times.
we use these words just too broadly. We use these two words too broadly. You know, bias is bad, ethics is good, you know, social side. We're just using these buzzwords where there's nothing behind it.
So for full spectrum, it's not
And then
black and white.
technology is bad, or LMs are bad, good, bad. It's this 50s style dialogue.
And it's also interesting that we have this tendency to automatically associate whatever is negative with machines. And I think, so we see a lot of negative things that might happen, but I like the optimism that positive things could also happen. It might be possible that machines, maybe decision processes taken by machines could be more transparent sometimes than human decision-making processes. And if a decision is against you, maybe in the end it's not a big consolation if it has been taken by a human. So if you can analyze fairness, bias more thoroughly for machines, maybe in some cases it's even positive. So we obsess about these things. At the same time, we might overlook other things that maybe are specific to machines. So one thing that I'm concerned with, and I think it also connects a little bit to Mike's talk, is this issue of what content is generated by machines and what is generated by humans. So currently, still most of the internet is actually human written text, and most of the music is still written by humans. But in the future, it's going to be a big mess. Maybe most of the text is machine text, most of the music is machine music. And somehow, as a human, I feel a little cheated if this is the case, and I don't know it. So I would like to know what was written by a human, by someone who put effort and artistic effort into creating something.
You'd like to know that up front.
So
You'll know it after a while. If you're reading something and it says Marcel Proust on it, and it was really done by generative AI, after a few pages, you'll say, no, come on.
Let's stay with that idea, though, you know, what's written by
That's
humans,
regulation,
what's not.
no?
Stéphane, I was
You're
going to...
asking for regulation. I think you're speaking about words. I completely agree. This idea that regulation is good or regulation is bad doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
We are in an environment which is constantly regulated. Each incentives are the result of regulations, are not opposed to regulations. So the question is really how to do it and not whether we should or we should not.
And regulation can also be a good thing, of course, for AI. If you look at, I mean, I remember when self-driving cars were becoming hot, everybody was talking about what's going to happen if we have a grandmother here and then a mother and 2 children here, and how are these systems going to solve the problem. And I remember at some point I talked to an engineer from Bosch, and he told me, well, look, the way an airbag works, we can't guarantee that airbags don't kill people. Airbags have killed people in the past. But there are testing authorities that evaluate airbags, and at some point, people who are skilled in the art, they come to the conviction that overall it's a good thing to have airbags. And maybe eventually it will be the same with self-driving cars. And then we can have these authorities that then give the stamp of approval, and that also protects the person who has programmed the code and the company that sells these things, because we don't want to end up in a situation where in the end the role of the human is to serve as a liability serve, that in the end everything that's done by machines has to be traced back to some human who can be blamed for it.
Well, it's a really fascinating debate, you know, and I'm convinced that I need to change my standpoint and how I'm looking at things, you know, particularly, for example, if it comes to bias. Stéphane, I wanted to bring you in because we've touched on bias. Let's go broader. Social manipulation, for example, using AI, you know, to propagate particular political views, for example. How do you get around that? How dangerous is that? And can we see it from another standpoint, as Mike suggested we should do when it comes to bias?
Well, I think here that probably Joshua tomorrow is going to speak about all these different kind of risks. So, I mean, obviously there are deep fakes, there are the possibility of having these LLM producing huge amount of disinformation and so on. But I think that kind of thing, I mean, most of us know about it, and I'm sure Yann is going to have something to say.
Yes, so LLMs have been around for a while. They've been available for quite a long time, including in open source. You know, starting with you know, several years ago. When I talk to my colleagues who do content moderation and are there to protect against attacks and, you know, disinformation and bots and things like this, they just have not seen a flood of generated data with bots. They just haven't seen it. It's just not happening. And so there was this idea somehow that we were going to be flooded by disinformation that is generated by LLMs. It's just not happening. There is disinformation, but it's produced by humans. And groups like QAnon, which had a huge impact on not this election, but the two before, it's two guys. There's no AI. The problem with disinformation is not the quantity of disinformation you generate, but it's the network of distribution. So if you have sympathizers and stuff like that, then it becomes influential. And that has nothing to do with like how much volume you produce.
But
that's
even if at the end it might be humans that are the malicious actors, AI certainly gives them tools to multiply their impact beyond.
Thank you for saying that. I was going to say that. The best countermeasure against attacks by AI is better AI.
Yeah,
so
but
the most sophisticated AI systems currently.
I mean, better AI, but controlled by whom?
Exactly.
Okay.
I
I
mean,
was gonna say
that's
Okay,
the
so
question.
now-
I mean,
so
there's
now that
a
addresses-
misalignment of interest, which is obvious here.
So now that addresses the question of bias, right? So as Mike
Not
said
bias.
totally correctly, you cannot have a system that is not biased. You're always going to have a bias. It's always a trade-off. And so the way to ensure that bias doesn't necessarily have like huge
I would
negative
call
effects
that
with AI
optimization rather than bias.
is
Multi-objective.
Yeah, multi-objective optimization.
sorry, is diversity, okay? If you have open source platforms, you will have a wide diversity of AI assistants with different opinions, different value systems, different biases, political or whatever they are, and then people have a choice. It's like the press. We need a high diversity in AI assistant for the same reason we need a diverse
You
press.
are right, but as you know, there is rather a monopoly situation.
There would be a monopoly situation
It's not
There would be a monopoly
we
situation
are in a monopoly situation.
if there is, if the proprietary systems win, and we can only get AI assistants from a handful of companies from China or the West Coast of the US, yes, there would be a monopoly.
It's also how these systems are structured. Humans evolved to be in clans and groups of 5 to 10 to 20 to 200 to build democracies, to build trust and all that. Suddenly we develop technology where everybody's listening to that one famous person. And that's an experiment that's been done on the human race in the last 20 years. And I don't think it's been, does someone agree or?
The semi-agree.
I don't think that, I mean, the jury may be out, but it has generated some massive disruption to human society. And it's you could have imagined a different model for these networks where there's a sphere in which, you know, children exist, and it's for children, and it's where children go, and spheres where others exist. Instead, no, everyone listens to Donald Trump, or Beyonce, and so we're doing this massive social experiment, and saying our technology will just solve it. And I think that we're not. I don't know where the inflection point's going to come, but it's not. It does not make it clear that it's getting better.
AC, did you want to add something there? No, I thought you did. I'm conscious of the time, and we could literally sit here. There's so much to unpack together. I just want to, you know, we've had a lot of positive talk up here about AI today. I just want to end on a positive note, and then we can get a couple of questions. Just get a sentence from you, in a nutshell, one thing that you're particularly optimistic about going forward with AI. Stéphane, if we start with you.
Okay. There are many, but when you asked the question, I had something in my mind, so I will tweak it in positive and both sides. I think there is one issue that we don't consider most of the time, which is neither positive or negative, but it's education, and it's the impact of AI in school. It's probably one of the places where things are moving the fastest because the kids are moving very quickly, are using it very quickly, and the teachers are quite destabilized about using that. So there, I think it's a very important area where we should put our effort to be positive so that we understand how to help teachers to adapt to the situation. They are much more exposed than in universities. In university, we think about ourselves, how to do it, but it's not so complicated. High school, below, is much more interesting, much more important. And that, I think, is a domain where I think we should positively focus our energy.
Okay, Stéphane, so I hear you saying, harnessing our attention on educational systems. Bernard, if I can get your sense of what's optimistic in your view.
So I think the global problems that we are facing, in particular the problem of climate change, but also the problem of future pandemics, topics like this, I see several such problems that I don't think we can master without AI. So I'm not gonna guarantee that we will solve them with AI. But for instance, the climate problem, I don't see a political solution. Maybe Mike can come up with a mechanism or an automatically designed mechanism. But even then, it will be non-trivial to get countries and communities to sign up to that mechanism. So I think in the end, we have to put a lot of effort into finding technological solutions for energy storage, energy generation. I guess storage is even more important because generation is quite cheap now with solar. And technological solutions probably also for carbon capture, because even if we slow down the amount of carbon we're depositing, we will still have to remove some. And potentially also technological solution for maybe even changing the albedo on the planet on a large scale at some point, and being reactive to this kind of dangers or even dangers such as meteorite impact. So there are all sorts of global problems that we cannot address without.
So focus on sustainability. I hear from you, Bernard. Asu, what do you think? Optimism, where do you stand on the question?
I am very excited about human complementary AI. I also call it pro-human AI. So where we can think about AI really, enabling, enhancing human flourishing because it helps humans with, work or scientific inquiry or creative tasks. To get there, I think needs a change of priorities, change of vision, and I think very much needs coupling technology with behavior and markets, and that's probably one thing we share with Mike in terms of why economics is so central and social science is so central in these discussions. But I think there's a hope and promise to get there, but I think it requires focus on the right vision and agenda.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, I was never an AI person, because to me, AI was the Frankenstein. We're trying to build this thing that looks like us, and we have enough of us. I want us to interact better with each other. So, yes, I think I have the human complementary AI and the new ways of, making new kinds of music together, and doing things together. And I have a lot of kind of positivity about that. But this human race is also extremely conflictual. We just bicker over resources till, and we can't just multiply resources. So economics also teaches us how to talk about scarcity. And a lot of the Silicon Valley problem that I'm not optimistic about is I don't think they get that. I don't think they get that they can't just blow away scarcity because they can just create as much stuff as you need. And that's not what happens in the real world. There's not as much stuff that you need. If you got a lot of stuff, I get less stuff. You got to find ways to have people be happy with that and to trade and to interact. And I think our world's gone backwards in this period. And I don't know if AI is going to help, but I am optimistic that if people think about it in the right way, it can try to be more transparent, allow more communication, bring down the temperature of all the conflict that I still see very dangerous for our world that we're in right now.
You're advocating essentially human complementarity to make some strides towards that, Mike.
Yeah, even just like the before large language models, just translation systems, they're pretty good. And
so maybe AI for science.
I can't speak Mandarin, but I can speak into this microphone in French. I'm pretty good in French, by the way, Stéphane.
AI for science.
And out comes Mandarin, and I can communicate to other people. But AI for science that makes us happier. I want people in the picture. I don't want to take away the joy.
That was the way to take people out of the picture, precisely. AI for science is very exciting.
Yeah.
AI for mathematics is fascinating because we are discovering a lot of...
Terry Tao will do even better mathematics.
There are amazing things around science.
Amazing things, excitement. Yann, your turn. What do you think of that optimism?
Well, certainly AI for science in medicine is very exciting at the moment. I don't personally work on it directly, but very favorable to my colleagues who partake in this. There's a lot of hope, indeed, that we'll find a solution to humanity's biggest problem with this. possibly climate change with new materials for energy storage or things of that type. Some of my colleagues at Firechat are working on it. So super exciting. And there's already a lot of progress that have been deployed, like in medical imaging, for example. That said, I think ultimately AI will make people smarter because all AI is going to be assistive. We talk about autonomous AI and things like that, but nobody is going to get an AI system that does not assist them in some way. And so the incentives are there. People are working on this. It's not like, there's two types of AI, like completely autonomous that doesn't talk to humans, and then AI that is designed to work with humans. All of AI is designed to work with humans. But right now, the problem of getting AI to interact properly with humans is number 354 in a list of problems, and we're still on number 5. So that's why people aren't working on it, because we still have to solve major conceptual problems before we can get there. But obviously, all AI will be assistive. So the way I think our interaction with even super intelligent systems of the future will be of the type that a leader in politics, business, or science, or academia, being accompanied by a staff of people who are smarter than them. I mean, it's certainly true in politics that most of the staff of politicians are smarter than the politicians themselves. So this concept that we'll be working with sort of virtual people that are smarter than us is not a foreign concept. I do this all the time. Most people I work with are smarter than me. So that's a relationship we'll have with them, and they will amplify our intelligence. They will allow us to be more creative, more productive. And it may have an effect on society that, or perhaps a disruptive effect that's similar to the disruptive effect of the printing press in the 15th century that allowed the dissemination of knowledge, because currently AI really is a way to disseminate knowledge, right?
So an amplifying of intelligence, that's what you're quite enthusiastic about, Yann. Thank you very much. Time has absolutely flown today. I wonder if we have our PhD students, there are just time for 2 incredibly short questions, if you can. And I wonder if you might make your way swiftly on the stage, just so we can get those questions in for our expert panel that have been so... Okay, just the 2 questions. Yeah, or you can just stand here, or you can head there. It's up to you, as you wish, wherever you're comfortable. You need the microphone? Okay. Yann, can I give you them? Oh, no, you've got the 2 microphones there. If you speak in there, lady. Okay, take it away.
Okay, thank you for this discussion. Assuming that we want more regulation, which from what I understand is a strong assumption, what do you think is the biggest misconception that policymakers have about AI that prevents them from regulating it efficiently? And how should we address them?
Okay, one person who's particularly passionate about that answer. Do you want to go ahead, Yann?
So the idea that AI is intrinsically dangerous and can lead to human extinction, that's a complete fallacy. It's just false. And it leads governments to regulate research and development and basically have tendencies to make open source and open research illegal. I think that's extremely dangerous.
Okay, thank you very much, Yann. And the second question, if you will.
Okay, so my question is more about education and also to you as professors, like in the domain of AI. So like research is really advancing, and the titles of papers might look incomprehensible for someone who graduated 10 years ago. So like what should students who go into this field, because we don't know what they're gonna have when they graduate, should learn, and that will stand the test of time? And more broadly, in education in general, what teachers should teach, especially that now students use AI tools to do their homeworks. So I think that education, how should it change?
Just the same message from centuries ago. Learn math.
Yeah.
No, learn math. Learn how to think. Learn how to think abstractly. Yeah. And yes, these tools They may do the calculus problem, but who cares? They just build on top of that. Just like with calculators, you don't have to do the arithmetic. You can now build on top of that, but just keep going. Every little bit of math I've ever learned has given me pleasure, and it's been useful in my life, and it's allowed me to connect to people.
Yeah.
Music and math, those are the two things to do.
Yeah, I like this answer, especially that we are here.
On the math.
If I may just maybe add,
Yes, of course,
math,
Esther.
of course, but foundations. And,
Yeah.
those foundations could be different kinds of areas. Mike mentioned 3. I would add optimization,
Computing was really optimization.
Oh, good. So we agree. It's sort of thinking about, foundational tools. Many of the talks, AI model or ideas AI models use very much depend on those foundations. So.
Okay, so take it back to the
Thank you.
basics. Thank you so much for those fantastic questions. Thank you so much for our expert panel, to Stéphane, to Bernard, to Asu, to Mike, to Yann. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that rounds up the first day. A show of hands of you who will be back tomorrow for more. Oh, fabulous. Okay, we know we have a full house. Thank you so much. Time has flown. We'll see you back here tomorrow for day 2, starting, I should say, at 9:30 sharp. Thank you so much.